Alright, so basically I had taken this faceplate off of this motor, which of course you've got this mounting hardware that goes on top of it. Just unbolt the 3 screws that go to that, and then there's a little actual screw itself also in this plate. I popped this off just by sticking a screwdriver inside of here, and this comes right off. And as I showed you in an earlier video, basically it's just got a bunch of plastic gears inside of it, and those gears in my case were all chewed up, and so what I'm going to try to do is just replace the gears using a product that I purchased from O'Reilly. Now before I do that, I'm going to take these gears out and just reconnect the motor and make sure it in fact turns in both directions, and kind of clean this up before I stick that new product in case it doesn't work. Then I can return that to O'Reilly and actually just buy a new motor. So again, before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in here and so you can see that's the shaft from the motor, but you can see all these just parts in here, and don't be intimidated by it. It's really easy to just pluck all that stuff out with a screwdriver, and you are going to want to take it all out. I'll show you in just a minute what mine looks like when I do, so that you can put the replacement part in, and of course I'll share that number with you. So just in case you're a real curious George, this is what the inner sprocket looks like when you take it out of the motor. It's a gear that looks like that, and I'm just gonna, before I take the other one and put it in there, make sure that they're about the same depth and have the same number of teeth on it. This is the part that I purchased from O'Reilly's, and you can see it's made by Car Done, part 4291. It's a window lift gear kit. I paid $19.99 for it. The gear kit comes with this gear in it, and along with that some grease. And actually what I found out when I was at O'Reilly's is the centerpiece there that you can see that looks a little more dark, it's a kind of a brass fitting, will actually not work in my motor, so I'm going to just use the original piece along with the shaft that goes in the motor. So what you can see right here is the original centerpiece that came in my motor as compared to this one. And what I'm going to do is, of course, this is just going to be turned around this way, and my original shaft will go in the middle of that. Yeah, it fits like that. And so this piece that came with the replacement part from O'Reilly's, I'm just going to take this piece out and use the bottom piece alone. And here's my gear assembly that used to be in here. I just pulled it out, and I'm going to compare it for depth and diameter against the replacement piece. So before I put the replacement part in, I wanted to make absolutely sure my motor was good. So I've taken out the inner working cogs and I've reconnected it to my original power supply, and I'll just turn on the ignition key and then see if the little shaft will rotate in both directions, and if so, then I'm going to install that replacement cog and reassemble the motor. So for those of you that like a lot of guidance, I'm going to go ahead and show you what happened here. So I went ahead and plugged the motor back up, and you can see here it buzzing both directions, so it works great. So in fact it was just jamming up because of that screwed up plastic cog, which I'm going to replace with the part I got from O'Reilly's. So here's the cog, and I'm going to go ahead and insert it into this this motor. And as I've said before, I'm going to have to use an old part, so this is going to have to come out. It's not a big deal. You just pop it straight out. You have to pull a little bit, and then I'm going to apply the grease. I have both from the manufacturer, and also bought some bearing grease, some grease for the car that I'm going to use as well, particularly on the ends of the shaft where they've kind of been drying out because I've been handling them so much. So I did finally get the replacement, or my original piece, into this bearing, and this cam rather, and there's 3 little plastic bearings you can kind of see here, here, and here, and they are a little tricky to kind of work all 3 at the same time. What basically I had to do was put 2 of them in, with this centerpiece, and then kind of tilt this back some and work in the 3rd one. So it's a little bit like a Rubik's Cube, but it does work. And my only concern now is how to get lubrication, down in here. So I'm going to probably pull this this centerpiece up a little bit and put some grease down behind it because I don't want this thing to try to roll without any kind of lubrication. Those little bearings, as I call them, actually, it was explained to me that they're for the purposes of keeping the window from being pushed down. So imagine the window's in the up position. These little bearings keep the window from somebody coming along and just pushing it back. And since I'm applying grease anyway, I figured I'd give you the close-up look at those 3 bearings I was talking about. So they do work in there. Like I said, get 2 into the cog, tilt this back a little bit, and you can squeeze a 3rd one underneath there. It didn't really take me but about a minute to get all that done. And so now I'm going to squeeze some grease in down to the cracks there and then throw it in the motor and off we go. So there you can see I've snuck some grease in. You know, I pull the center cog up a little bit, and I've snuck some grease in around each one of those little bearings that I described, and I'm going to work it up just a little bit more, and then I'm going to push it down just to see if I can get as much grease as possible in the inner workings. So you can see I've taken the manufacturer's grease and I've just lubed up the entire cog, the teeth, and I just took the remaining amount and just squeezed every bit of it into the motor. I have some axle grease that I'm going to use to apply to the shaft where it joins to the motor, but I figure there's no reason wasting the grease that they gave. So now that I have the cog in, and it was so simple, I just pushed it right in, lined up perfect. I don't think you'd have any problems anyway. I'm going to fill in the top portion of this cog with this red pressure grease. I don't know, I just asked the guy for some grease and this is what he gave me. So just to tilt, it's extreme pressure Staplex, red grease. So coincidentally just happens to match what the manufacturer provided. So I popped the plate back on. Before I did, I filled up the entire top of that gear with grease, and this is the original, I'm going to call it an extension, but it's the gear that fits into the window. There's one end that fits into the plastic part, the cog that I just inserted, and it just popped right in, no problem. So all I'm going to do now is put back the hardware and reinstall the motor.